All right. So my name is Mike Nichols. I am a staff product designer. I work on the Manage Workspace team. So what is the Workspace group? The Workspace group is responsible for rationalizing the data model for containers and resources within GitLab. Kind of a mouthful. But really, it comes down to defining and applying settings to all your groups, subgroups, projects, aggregating data from all of those things, organizing data containers, and we do some hardware controls, as well as a little bit with the user profile. So what is the big problem we're trying to solve? So today, GitLab's features exist at 3 levels: the instance, the group, and the project. This leads to a few problems. 1, 3 ways to build a feature leads to a lot of engineering inefficiency. We're really restricting the audience to instance level features, since many of these are only admin. And there's some UX problems. There's an inconsistency between group features that are available at the project and group level, and this creates some navigation and some usability issues. And there really just isn't a place for dedicated instance level features. So where do we begin? When I was moving over to this group, it sounded like an interesting and challenging problem. But where do we begin? Well, so on April 12th, 85 days ago, hence the first 90 days title, I joined the team. So the first thing I want to point out is I've switched a few teams. In the past, we always create these transition issues, but this is the first time that I really leaned into it and leveraged it. So I'd like to encourage everybody to not take this as a step that you have to check off, but a really a useful thing. So one, it's a great place to organize and just kind of get all the information about links to stuff, ongoing efforts, priorities, team meetings, and that stuff. But what I really used it for is a bookmark. When you first join a new group, you're going to be lost. So this kind of serves as an anchor point to reach back to. But the one I really wanted to point out was a pro tip from Marcel. This time I asked everybody on the team 30, 60, 90 days, what are your expectations for me? Found this to be super useful as I was going through this process. You kind of start feeling lost a little bit, come back to those and say, okay, this is what we really need to focus on during this time. In addition to that, Marcel also provided me a lot of context, links, and a lot of the design stuff. So the first thing I did was read and kind of read everything. So the Workspace group did not start with me. It started long before that. I traced it back as far as August 2020. So there's been a tremendous amount of issues, videos, epics, discussions, lots of stuff. So what I did first was I read all the issues. The important thing was reading the whole issue, all the comments, every single one of them. And that's important to not just get the outputs of it, but see the discussion so you can understand the pros and the cons of why people are presenting different things. Followed all the links, kind of went through the spider web, kind of basically became a Google bot at this point, reaching out of any linked things, watched all those videos, read all those discussions. But then I did it all again and again and again. And the reason I point that out is because when you read things the first time, a lot of times you're like, oh, I don't know about that. You kind of have preconceived notions about that. But once you read the entire body of work, oftentimes your opinion changes on the things that you read at the beginning. So I'd encourage to read and read and read when you're taking on a large problem like this. So this was difficult to do. When I first got in here, I kind of felt the pressure, I need to start producing some. I'd fallen into this for weeks, but I kept reminding myself that it's important to pound this information in my brain, because any solution without the information is probably going to be incorrect. And also just great kudos to GitLab, because without our linked issues and the way we document things, all this information could have been lost, but it was all there from years ago, and I was able to find it. So as I'm going through this mountain of information, I realized I needed to start taking notes. So I created a issue in my personal project. And I think it's important to have a place where you can dump unrefined thoughts. So if you were to read this issue, a lot of it probably wouldn't make sense to anybody but me. But having a place that you can just dump all this information, ideas, hopes, dreams, all that good stuff, has been super useful for me. And as you can see on the right-hand side, it has gotten pretty long. So there's a lot of great information that is now stored in there. So the next step, start asking questions. So as I read, I kind of had a few questions that kind of pop up in my mind. And I kind of honed in on 3 ones. Our namespace is going to be presented in the future as a single container type, or are they going to take multiple forms? What's the top level mechanism? And already planning to change the namespace model organization inheritance model. So the goal of this question was really to understand the bounds of the problem, where we could go, where we couldn't, where solutions might be more difficult to achieve. And what I did with this was kind of talk to everybody, talk to the engineering folks, talk to product people, talk to people that have worked on this in the past, and just kind of get everybody's opinion on this. Also, as you can tell and probably see from my screenshot here, I do like to talk with my hands, so I try to find the most ridiculous example of that, and I think I did that. So if you watched any of my showcases before, you know that kind of my core belief as a designer is getting to the root of the problem. So as I was reading through all of the discussions, started taking a look at sus verbatims. Our PM, Christina, is doing customer interviews at the moment. So reviewing all of those, we started to generate a giant list of problem statements. More than just the 3 ones that I started with, but kind of a raw list of everything. So we collected all those problem statements in an issue. And then I was able to utilize the recently introduced drag and drop feature to reorganize them. What we would do is we would just kind of cluster them together until we felt like we got a group. And if there were ones that didn't fit in that group, we created new groups. The next step was kind of consolidate them, find the duplicates, and put them together in themes with the goal of trying to get to some root cause problems. Right now we have a consolidated list, but we're determining whether or not we believe that they are root cause, or if they're still a little bit deeper we can go. So the end goal of these root cause problems is to be used as a tool, as an investigation, serve as an anchor in discussions, and ultimately used for the criteria of evaluating the success of design solutions. So then we started exploring the solutions with the context from the reading and the problem statements in hand. We would start looking at possible solutions, but the goal wasn't necessarily to arrive at a final solution. It was more to explore ideas and see where they might take us. So I tried out a number of configurations and determined what would be needed for each. So basically, what would it take from a design and engineering standpoint to get them accomplished. For each one, I created a flow map, and then we evaluated them against the problem statements that were and listed any drawbacks. I would like to take a moment to make a quick plug for flow maps. I love them. They turned out to be a great tool for this problem solving, but I think we are underutilizing them as a tool. I find that it's a great way to iterate quickly through ideas because they're low fidelity enough, but they have just enough UI that's kind of grounded back in the product. Figma Jam was a tool I was using for that. So this is kind of the dun 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 moment of the talk here. So I'm guessing a lot of people were hoping that I would go through these solutions today. But unfortunately, there's a lot of them, and it takes about 5-10 minutes to go through each one. So this format just wouldn't have been possible for that. I would have already been out of time. But I have an issue link there that has a write-up on each one of them, and each one of them I recorded kind of walkthrough video. So I'd invite everybody who's interested in the solution investigation to go check out that issue and watch those async. But we do have some takeaways that I'd like to talk about. So we learned that there's an inherent dichotomy that exists. So an example is access versus confidentiality. You might want to add everybody to the root group so that everybody has access to everything, but then that's inherently then nothing can be confidential if everybody's in everything. That's an example of that. Or content, optimizing for content consumption oftentimes leads to an admin experience that isn't there. So as we're going through, we know that there are certain things that there just isn't, it's always going to be an either or, and we're going to have to account for those things. Another thing is no matter where you put the workspace, on the top, the bottom, left, middle, wherever you put it, it's not going to share or solve the horizontal sharing problem. So that's another idea that we might need to look into. What we know we need to do, groups and projects are either going to need to converge or diverge. So as namespaces, as features become available as namespaces, and more, becomes more feature parity between there. We're either going to need to make a decision on whether we make groups and projects look a lot like each other or use them as completely separate tools, meaning like jobs to be done that are focused on groups versus jobs to be done that are focused on projects. We know we need to improve the navigation and wayfinding between spaces. We also need to evaluate context switching. So the example I like to use for this, if I go to a group and I click on an issue, I'm taken out of that group and I'm placed into a project. Now, I'm not so necessarily saying that that's bad, but what we may have unintentionally done is completely switch the context on our users there. We're doing this context switching a lot. And the thought is that this might be contributing to the I feel lost in GitLab problem. We also need to take a look at improving the landmarks so a user can orientate themselves to where they are in the organization. And we know that namespaces are going to be part of any final solution. So one more thing. Consolidating groups and projects, and this probably could have been its own talk in itself, but engineering work is currently underway to consolidate groups and projects behind the scenes. So from an engineering standpoint, they're moving to namespaces. This has a lot of engineering benefits, but it also opens up the door for feature X to become available at all other levels. We know namespaces will be part of any workspace solution. So this is a good time, even though we don't have the final solution of what the overall workspace vision is going to look like, doesn't mean we can't start thinking about what it might mean if your features in your group move to, let's say, a project or a group, or vice versa. So teams are likely to face many of the same challenges when they're migrating these features. So what my ask is, please ping me if your group is planning to move these, evaluating whether they want to move these, or are already in the process of moving these features between different levels. My goal here is to assist, but also like I want to learn what the challenges are so I can help other teams and then also apply that solution. And I am hoping to develop an issue template to help groups go through this process. And I have started that there. It's pretty bare bones at this point, but as people go through the process, we will fill that out. And I think that's it. So thanks to everybody that helped me work on this. This has been a lot of people involved, way too many to list here. So thank you, everybody.
All right, and I am going to keep recording for the discussion, hopefully. And I believe Tori has at least the first question, and I see some coming in right now. So Tori, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was wondering, just because we have a little bit of extra time, if you would be willing or able to share maybe one of the explorations that you worked on, maybe the one that you're feeling most confident about, to kind of give me and everyone else a sense of where Workspace may potentially be going. I know you said it will take some time. Maybe we have time for one. I don't know. I'll leave that to you.
I'd like to do that. I'd rather just defer to the recordings on there. They're already on there. I stuffed all of this presentation information in my head, and I'd rather not fumble through one of those. There are some, I recorded them with Blair, so there is a little bit of, you'll get a presentation, but you'll also get some kind of feedback and follow-up questions from Blair on those. So if you don't mind, I'd rather just defer to those.
Sure. Yeah, I'll definitely watch the videos.
Looks like I have the next question. You know, as you pointed out earlier in your presentation, this problem's existed for a long time. There was a group first formed around it in early 2020. And personally, it's something I've been watching for a long time because it's very relevant to my area. In your opinion, why has there not been a lot of traction on solving it in the past? And sort of with that in mind, you know, how are you approaching the problem?
Yeah, I think that there definitely has been work on it the whole time. I think it's maybe perceived as not having traction because we're kind of now just getting to the what's the workspace, what's the top thing on there. But the work that's been going on for consolidation of groups basically was determined that whatever solution there was going to be so much engineering efficiency gained by consolidating groups and projects into a namespace that it was decided they were going to work on that first. So the team's actually been working for a year or so on that solution. So we haven't gotten the kind of overall thing figured out, but the kind of underlying building blocks have been worked on for some time now. It's also just a complex problem that is fraught with those dichotomies that I was kind of mentioned. There isn't a silver bullet easy solution. So it's just the kind of thing that's going to take some time to work through.
Great, thank you.
So my question was, could you elaborate a little bit more on why this won't solve the horizontal sharing problem?
Sure.
And what
So
you mean by that?
anything that any kind of vertical tree structure leads you to a place where you need, let's say, an asset here that needs to be available in a project over here. So there just isn't a way that, what I mean by that is, it doesn't matter what you do, put it at the top, bottom, left, right, wherever, like one thing can't solve that. It has to be a different mechanism that allows you to share horizontally, because there just needs to be a way to get across things. So an organization that wants two separate entities to exist for reason A oftentimes needs a resource to share as if they were one group horizontally. So it just needs to be a different mechanism. If that makes sense. I also think I explained that better in like the 4th video on that issue that I linked. I think that it's definitely in one of those solutions there. I'm trying to remember I phrased that better, I think, in that video, right, Blair?
Yeah, definitely. And I will add, and Mike sort of hinted at this in Tori's question, but the videos are accompany not just the problem statements, but also have great web flows with each one. And it's kind of a conversation between Mike and I. So there's a little bit of back and forth. And there's about 8 or 9 of them. So that's kind of why take it at your own time. It looks like the end of the questions. I believe Justin's filling out the rest of the notes. I'm going to hit stop here.